the only thing that I was ever shocked by about hostage negotiation. I never thought the proof of life issue applied in the business world.
Chris Voss, former lead hostage negotiator for the FBI and author of the massive bestseller, Never Split the Difference. So how do you exit while maintaining an open door to the potential of further negotiation?
It starts with a negotiation skill that is remarkably simple, incredibly flexible, takes a lot of practice to get used to this, a fair amount of coaching.
Subscribe and listen to Tribe of Millionaires today. Being a hostage negotiator, an FBI hostage negotiator, what's the most challenging aspect of that when you're in a negotiation for you personally or for the entire situation? What's the most difficult or challenging aspect of that for you?
Yeah, probably just staying in a process, which is staying in the moment. I mean, if you can stay in a process, you can stay in a moment, and you got a good process, based on that you trained and you've used it, and you continue to collaborate and learn every step of the way. Then, I never thought of myself as a Zen guy. I remember when we were working on the book with Tal Ross, he was saying your approach is very Zen. It's very Tai Chi. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? But if you can stay in the moment and just let the process take care of itself, that's really the only challenge.
When you're in the process, is it pretty prescriptive situation to situation, or is it simply a matter of taking different tactics and stacking them differently?
It's a little, I don't know, maybe the analogy is, we do a lot of real estate, residential real estate agent negotiation coaching. A guy that I do the coaching with is this guy named Steve Schultz, great dude, was a Super Bowl captain, played for the Miami Dolphins under Don Shula. When they played in the Super Bowl, they lost, but he was a captain, and he talked about, all right, so you study tendencies, and then a ball gets snapped. And then you got to adapt to everything in the moment, the chaos. And, you may have tried to figure out what the other side was going to do based on their tendencies, based on what you saw at the moment. But then the ball gets snapped. So negotiations are very much like that. You prepare, you have an idea where the other side's coming from, and then the ball is snapped, and you got to be able to adapt quickly in the moment.
Is there an advantage that the other side has in that situation that's just simply not able to be overcome, no matter how good the negotiation, no matter how good the process?
Well, it's not necessarily it's an advantage. It's whether or not they're going to make the deal. We learned there was a time frame when I was working in international kidnappings where Al Qaeda was going to kill everybody they got their hands on, and they were going to make it look like a negotiation. Now, they were never going to make the deal. It was what we refer to as proof of life. Do they have the hostage, and are they going to let them go? Is there a deal, and is the deal with you? And I even worked kidnappings where a competing group called and said they had the hostage. There's all sorts of issues of proof of life. There are fake kidnappings out of Mexico. Somebody's kid goes drinking in one of those Mexican resorts and gets drunk and loses their wallet. They call the kid's parents while the kid's passed out and say, we got your kid, give us $10,000. There's all sorts of aspects to proof of life. Is there a deal, and is the deal with you? And we had to recognize that that was going on in Al Qaeda. They were going to make it look like a deal, but they were never going to make the deal. And a little bit of that is ferreting out whether or not there's a deal and whether or not the deal is with you.
So it's intent. Do they actually intend to make the deal? That's the only time that they might not not an advantage, but
yeah, and it's not whether or not they have an advantage, but are they negotiating in good faith? And I was the only thing that I was ever shocked by about hostage negotiation. I never thought the proof of life issue applied in the business world. I thought, this is stupid. Why would people waste their time engaging in interactions they have no intention of consummating? I'm a time is money person, and there are three negotiation types: assertive, analyst, accommodator. Assertive is time is money. Analyst is information is money, and accommodator is relationships are money. Those are your basic core types. The world does split pretty evenly into thirds. If you're coachable, then you start as one of those default types, and then you start realizing that money really is time and relationships, and then time, relationships, and information. So I forgot, I got off on a tangent. What was, and I forgive my rambling, and the original question you posed me.
No, yeah, it was, boy, now I forgot the original question. It was around I had the next question in my mind I was about to ask. That's okay. We'll
All right,
come
we'll
back
come
to it
back to it because
if I think of it.
I know there's a reason I ran down that rabbit hole over time is money. Oh well, yeah, proof of life.
Proof of
In the
life.
business
Thank you.
world, why
Yes.
would you waste time negotiating when you have no intention of consummating?
Yeah.
And the book came out, and then a gentleman sent me a book that he'd written. I think it was called Bare Knuckle Bargaining. And I'm reading in Bare Knuckle Bargaining this concept of the rabbit, where you're the fool in the game, where you're just there as a competing bid. And I remember thinking, like, no, I thought that was just in the movies. That's not really what the case. And we started teaching that in business negotiation. And then I ran across a sales company, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, it's in the Challenger sale. At least 20% of your interactions are fake interactions. They want due diligence. They want you for a competing bid." And we've refined in a Black Swan group our methodology, and in some cases it's as high as 80% of the time. How you can sniff it out quickly. And I haven't seen a businessman yet that when I begin to lay it out, the light bulbs start going on over their head. Like, yeah, it was my gut instinct that they were never going to make the deal. I didn't imagine they were going to do it. And a lot of business people resonate. It's not a sin to not get the deal. It's a sin to take a long time to not get the deal. And that's been the one thing that's really surprised me coming from hostage negotiation to business negotiation, realizing no matter who you are, especially if you're really good, if you're the best in class at what you do, you are by definition due diligence.
What are some things other than awareness and the gut feeling? Maybe gut feeling is most of it. What are some things that you do train or you've learned for people to be able to sniff out when they are just due diligence?
Well, to start with, if you're good at listening to your gut's pretty accurate. There's actually some really scientific reasons behind that why your gut is really accurate. And then you're worried about leaving a bad impression. I'm having a conversation with a CEO of a ridiculously successful marketing company, and he built it from the ground up in 11 years. Went from broad space in the back of a drugstore on a desk he didn't own by himself on a laptop to this, and 12 years later, this multi-million-dollar operation with, he's got several hundred employees, huge operation. And he's saying, like, I cut it off with this client. I finally told him, I wasn't going to go any further. And I just want to know if I did the right thing. And he's telling me this interaction that went on for months because he's best in class and he's worried about his reputation, that I think he should have cut it off after a week. Now, the issue is, how do you cut it off without it ruining your reputation? And there are some really deferential ways to do that. So first, how do you sniff it out? If your gut instinct is telling you you're being played, you're probably being played. You probably due diligence. You're probably free consulting. If you're best in class, I'm going to call you up and I go, like, give me a proposal. I want to know how you do what you do. I got this, I got a guy emailing me today. Say, well, before I buy a Mercedes, I find out how much it is and I take it for a test drive. That's the way I buy my Mercedes. I always take it for a test drive. Well, that's free consulting. You ain't taking me for a test drive because your test drive was really getting to the meeting. It's not really a test drive. You're asking for some of my value. So your gut instinct is telling you that maybe they're using you for free consulting. Maybe they're using you for a competing bid. And again, if you're the best there is, you're by definition where they're going to go to for free consulting. Then how do you test it? How do you check to see if you can flip them from the client that sucks the life out of you to the client that's easy to work with? How do you say no?
Yeah.
In a polite and deferential way, so that they see you as a straight shooter and someone who's very genuine, as opposed to a jerk. And the hostage negotiation skills all that come into play.
I have to believe that you backdoor into a strong negotiation tactic when you walk away the right way, meaning you're going to know right away, does this person really, really want to pursue you, or were you just due diligence? But how You mentioned a moment ago about determining and understanding how they're your due diligence and ways to sniff it out, and then ways to cut it off in a deferential way. What is the most impactful way to cut something off like that in a deferential way that still leaves open the possibility that you may not have been due diligence? You mentioned it was 2 out of 10 times, maybe up to 8, but if it's 2 out of 10, there's an 80% chance they want you. Maybe your gut's wrong. So how do you exit while maintaining an open door to the potential of further negotiation? Tribe listeners, I have an extremely exciting announcement for all of you. Do you want to come hang out with Cody Sanchez, David Osborne, David Green, Rich Roll, and even yours truly down in Austin, Texas? Well, let's do it. May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, for the first time ever, GoBundance, the exclusive millionaire membership group, is opening up an event to anyone, man, woman, millionaire or not, and we're calling it the Austin Entrepreneurial Summit. At the AES, you'll meet all those people I mentioned, plus GoBundance members on both the men's and women's side, and I'll be there hanging out the entire time. Every event I've ever attended for GoBundance has given me a disproportionate return on the money spent and the time spent to get there. And this is the biggest one that GoBundance has ever done. So if you're a member, not a member, and you're looking to supercharge the second part of your year, 2024, this event in May is a great way to get that all kickstarted. Go to GoBundance.com/AES right now for early bird pricing for members and guests. And warning, the power of GoBundance events is that it holds you accountable long after you're gone to achieving whatever goals you've set. So this event will change your life. GoBundance.com/AES. I'll see you there. Let's get back to the show.
Well, it starts with a negotiation skill that is a label, remarkably simple, incredibly flexible. Takes a lot of practice to get used to this, a fair amount of coaching. But I'm on a coaching call, or we're on a client call the other day, and my head of business development says, "Sounds like you're still shopping around." And just like that. It's not accusatory. It's just observational. It's a label. It's just an observation. There's a number of reasons why that hits a brain favorably, not confrontational. Sounds like you're still shopping around. Now he comes back at us with, "Oh, no. Now that's a genuine response that he's not shopping around. He's not due diligence, competing bids, gathering information, none of those things." Now, if they are, they're going to say, yeah, still looking at our options, still gathering information. At that point in time, and I've had people say, how are we going to decide whether or not to use you if we don't know how you do what you're doing? Well, how I do it is part of the secret sauce. And I have had people take my methodology of how to their preferred vendor and say, can you do this? And the preferred vendor said, "Well, yeah, of course we can. What's your preferred vendor going to say?" So they're going to take my how and they're going to give it to their trusted advisor, and they're going to run it through somebody else. And if they tell me they are still shopping around, and I've said this, happy to share that with you when we've made mutual commitments to one another. Which is, that's fair without me using the F-bomb, which is fair. Fair is the F-bomb.
Yep.
And happy to commit to you when you've committed to us. And if you're not willing to make that agreement, you are a bad life-sucking client forever if I get the business with you. And what we found in checking this out, pursuing this, we happen to, a friend of mine, Joe Polish, runs Genius Network, and he's got a phrase, ELF and half. ELF is a client that's easy, lucrative, and fun, and half is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. So we ran some data on the half versus ELFs. And a half costs us, and would cost you, 2 to 5 times the amount of time from the beginning to the end of the deal. And they're not repeat clients. Because if they're half for you, then you're half for them. If they're hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating for you, you're going to be that way for them. It's a bad relationship. So I've just taken a 50% cut in pay for a client that's not going to repeat. I'm not sure that that's a sustainable way to run my business. And what we found is when we take away the time from the halves, there were a bunch of elves behind him waiting in line. And my choice is, do I do I take a 50% cut and pay for a client that's not going to repeat, or do I gently move that client off to the side and say, look, when this is a two-way street of a long-term trusted relationship, we'll do business. But in the meantime, there's somebody standing behind you that's not a pain in the neck.
I like that. I haven't heard that. I'm very familiar with Joe's work, and I haven't heard half an elf. That's awesome. So I appreciate you sharing that. Of this, thinking about the book, Never Split the Difference. The title's brilliant because it is probably, the most overutilized and ineffective tactic in
Yeah.
negotiation. You train a lot of concepts, a lot of strategies, a lot of tactics. I'm curious of the ones that you talk about, everything, the Ackerman plan, concepts like 73855, mirroring, labeling, all of these things. When you're training a client, you mentioned heavy coaching on some of this stuff. Which of those are the easiest for clients to uptake? Which one is, do you find people, whoa, I get it, and they lean into right away? Is any of those the low hanging fruit of negotiation tactic that your clients have utilized?
There's a little bit of it depends upon how the person is wired and what they're willing to try in a small stakes interaction and trigger into quickly. And there are a variety of things that are both the thing that's easy is easy. There's simple and difficult. Is it complicated? But is it so different that it scares you and you won't do it because it's the discomfort factor is very high, and a lot of it has to do with your tolerance for discomfort. Discomfort is an indicator of accelerated learning. And is it different than anything you've ever done? Now, one of those things is no-oriented questions, getting somebody to say no and getting them instead of getting them to say yes. Some people are addicted to yes, and it starts with is now a bad time to talk versus have you got a few minutes to talk.
Mm.
Now, the no-oriented questions, I've seen a lot of people instantaneously click and bang, they're doing it, and they're very coachable. They're time-oriented, and they've tried some stuff and they're willing, they don't care what the stakes are. If they could see it, they'll try it. Most people need small stakes practice for high stakes results. So no oriented questions is like the quickest switch to flip. We're doing a training with a hospital holding corporation, and we're laying out the evolution of the no oriented question. By the way, I've got if I will, I'll do a shameless commercial.
Do it.
We got a free PDF download, top 10 oriented questions. You can download and subscribe to our newsletter, but you get the download of the top 10. And if you'd like, certainly share the link with you guys to take you straight to that.
Perfect.
But anyway, this woman's hospital holding corporation, she's trying to get the head nurse in a hospital to adopt this methodology. And the head nurse has been saying no, 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 no. And she says, this woman's in no mode. And I'm like, okay, change the question. So she literally gets up out of the training, walks out into the hall, calls her on the phone and says, are you against instituting this methodology? Head nurse immediately comes back like, no, I'm not against it. She walks back in the room and says, you guys are not going to believe what just happened. This woman has been refusing to make the agreement over the word yes for weeks. Makes it when I change the word no. So upside to no oriented questions, I've got lots of reasons why. It's an instantaneous 23% increase in effectiveness. Instantaneous, if you can flip the switch. And it's the tip of the iceberg. Like everybody on my team, as soon as new hires, everybody across the Black Swan group, as soon as they see how effective no-oriented questions are, bang, 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 bang. They're all doing them all the time. Now, there's no listening involved. It's a decision-making tool. And saying no makes people feel safe and protected, which increases the chances they're going to make a decision. So there's a difference between a decision-making tool and a listening tool, because how much time do you have for somebody who's not listening to you? Zero.
Yeah.
So while no-oriented questions work very well, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And there's a lot more there to make deals that require actual listening and adaptation.
That makes perfect sense. You mentioned a minute ago that it really depends on the individual style, how they're wired, I think you said. Does that wiring directly route back to the three categories you mentioned, the assertive, the analyst, and the accommodator?
Yeah, it does. The assertive, the time is money guy, they tend to flip to no-oriented questions quickly, cleanly, very, very quickly. Analysts, they want to think about it a little bit more. The next in line, they love data. They're data analyzing, loving creatures.
23%.
Yeah,
That's good enough.
and the now the accommodators, relationship oriented, they find no answer to questions abrupt. They feel confrontational.
That's me.
Consequently, like I'm going to ask you to send a one-line text to somebody. Have you given up on being on my podcast?
Hmm.
The assertive and the analyst will send it out as is. Accommodator is going to be like, "Hey Jamie, how are you today? Hope you're doing well. Have you given up on being my podcast? Because I haven't, and I should love to talk to you." The accommodators are so relationship focused that sometimes when you need that one shot bullseye, it takes them a little bit longer to adapt to that, and there's less comfort with it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the best negotiator combines all three: is relationship oriented, is time oriented, is data oriented, and weaves these three things together in a complementary fashion.
Which of the three are you naturally?
I'm an assertive. I'm a time is money person.
What's the downside to being an assertive for you?
Tone of voice. Of the three types, the only one whose natural tone of voice is always counterproductive is the assertive. Now, the analyst has a tendency to have much more closer to what we refer to as the late night FM DJ voice,
Yeah.
the soothing voice. An analyst can sometimes come off as cold and indifferent. And so they got to add a little bit of warmth into their voice. Accommodators have phenomenal voices. People love talking to accommodators. Accommodators' deal velocity is very high. Their details tend to be very low. But there's a tremendous upside to being likable, not needing to be liked, but being likable. And accommodators have that very well. The assertive tone of voice, you always feel like you're getting hit in the face with a brick. And even when you need to be assertive, it's counterproductive. So the assertive is the one. I mean, I got to be very careful with my tone of voice because I put people off. And I think, there was what was it? Coach of Michigan, Jim. Is it Jim or John? Jim, I think, coaches
Jim.
Michigan.
Jim is the coach of Michigan. Yeah.
When he was coaching the 49ers, he did this really funny commercial where he's like, "I'm not yelling, I'm not angry."
Right.
That's the assertive.
Got it. Are you able to turn this on and off at this point in your life? Or are you, like, for instance, coming on a call, an interview like this, are you immediately sizing me up? Are you immediately trying to figure out, where we stand in this? Few words in, body language, 7:30, 8:55, all of that. Is it an on-off switch? Are you human sometimes, negotiator others? Or is it just intertwined in who you are day to day, minute to minute?
I think everything is learned to start with. Now, what are we predisposed to in different directions? I view negotiation as collaboration for long-term relationships, trusted relationships. So there's nothing wrong with me trying to be constantly in negotiation mode. The only thing I might be sizing you up for is if whether or not you're going to hurt me, are you going to cheat me, you're going to pick my pocket, you're going to take advantage from me. I'll size that up fairly quickly. After that, I'm looking to connect. I just want to know whether or not you're a threat. If you're not a threat, then let's see if we can do business together. If you are a threat, I got other things to do.
How do you determine that?
First of all, I may proof of life. I may try to see whether or not you're trying to use me. And this proof of life thing, I got back to one of my biz dev guys today because I got somebody who used the analogy on us. I want to know how much the Mercedes is. I want to take it for a test drive before I buy it. And I shot back, I sent a private text to my guy in the team describing this person with an unflattering adjective. And he said, that's about half the people that get in touch with us. I'm like, cool. Stop wasting time on it. So, let's assess right up front whether or not you're using the skills to cheat me or to take advantage of me. And there's enough of them out there, but the bottom line is they're getting in the way of the people that will be great collaborators. And, I feel my personal philosophy is this is a bountiful world. There's a lot here.
Yeah.
That doesn't make the world perfect. I believe the world is at least 70% pure opportunity. That still leaves a fairly high percentage of stuff you got to watch out for. So learn how to guard yourself for the stuff you got to watch out for, and then proceed um, uh, optimistically after you've done the sorting.
We talked about the no questions and how that's the flip of the switch, 23% improvement rate. And I can imagine that the leap from nothing to no questions is shorter than the leap from no question to whatever the next tactic to deploy or whatever the next strategy might be is. So for clients you work with or people that are looking to improve negotiation skills, what's the opposite question? What's the hardest? What's the thing that's just so unnatural? And maybe it depends on how you're wired. I don't know, but what's the thing that's so seemingly maybe not unnatural is the word, but difficult to sort of embed or takes many repetitions before you truly get good at it? Is there any tactic or concept that lands for you with?
It's a little bit. It's a phrase we call having happy ears. You got to be careful you don't have happy ears. Like if they've responded with something that's close, jumping in too quick to what your answer is or the path forward. Because there's two problems with happy ears. The first is you might not have heard it exactly right. And secondly, the other side is this gut instinct that you jumped a little quick and you didn't listen. I'm actually having a conversation about this yesterday with Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
I've been on Jordan's podcast. He came on. We got a special platform that's essentially live coaching globally. And I did it yesterday. It's called Fireside. And Jordan and I are on, and he and I do a little Q&A. We go back and forth for a little while, and then he's taking live questions. And Jordan is very much into asking questions, but also follow-up questions based on what you heard, not based on your pre-prepped answers. So, you got to hear. And I said to Jordan, and he agreed with me, we see it the same way. At some point in time, you're not going to hear it exactly right. And if you've been confirming to the other side that you're not actually listening, then when you get it wrong, you're not going to catch it and it's going to go bad. I'm being pitched on a commercial real estate investment fund some months back at a conference I'm speaking at. And a gentleman asked me, what do you think about investing in commercial real estate funds? And I gave him an answer, and he immediately had a response from my answer. And my gut instinct was, that's a little quick. I mean, that's accurate, but your answer is always going to be accurate. So he asked me another question, and I answered, and he immediately had a solution for that. So I just confirmed the guy wasn't listening.
Yeah.
And I simply turned to the person to the other side of me, and I never spoke to him again. I just don't have time for people that are not listening, no matter how smart they are, no matter how good their answers are. At some point in time, them not listening, it's going to be like, when the Challenger blew up. They said, well, if it gets below this certain temperature, these seals are going to fail on us. And I don't need my space shuttle blowing up because somebody wasn't listening to
me. I have happy ears as soon as often somebody introduces themselves. Like I don't remember their name because I'm in my mind. It's like, Jamie, nice to meet you. Right. Like immediately I'm queued up with the return greeting. So I'm an accommodator. I don't know if that is, I think I am from what you've described. I know I'm not an analyst for sure. And assertive, it depends on the day, but how do I listen? Because I can see how I can appear to have happy ears, patient, wait. I heard this guy, Chris Voss, say, don't have the immediate response. Look as though you're thinking. But breathing, I'm just curious tactically, how do you get in the mode of truly just saying, okay, hey, just be here. Listen, there's more there than whatever the next thought is in your mind. How do you get there? And does it change by different type?
Yeah, it's a little bit how you tee yourself up in a moment. I think to some degree, like I'm not good at names because I'm great at concepts. Like you say something that I find interesting, I'm going to forget your name because I'm so fascinated about the idea you just laid out.
That's fair.
And I have a tendency to really remember ideas and utterly be fascinated by them. So for me, and my ability to remember a name, there's a number of different devices. Jim Quick, the memory guy, I think he talks about using a name several times.
Yeah.
If I'll stop and I'll find out, like, how'd you get your name? Like I said, a family name. I know it's taboo, forbidden, verboten to discuss people's ethnicities these days because of what you might be thinking. That's the thought police out there.
Crazy.
But the ethnicity behind your name. The origin of who you are as a human being. Was it a family name? And to me, if I can get curious, anything I get curious about, I'm going to remember. So if I take the time to get curious about your name, I'll remember it. What catches my curiosity very quickly might be what you've said. And then bang, because curiosity takes your focus. And then you dive into something, you have a great time with it. And you get smarter. So if you set yourself up in the beginning, like, let me get curious about the guy or gal's name right off the bat, then what triggers your curiosity? I love people's origins, and I'll dig into their origin. Then I'll remember the name.
Is there a scenario outside of business or hostage negotiation, obviously, maybe a daily scenario that, I don't know, if the whole time you may have thought, man, negotiation skill is just underutilized in this scenario, or maybe more recently that you've thought, oh, wow, like I can see how these negotiation skills that I taught in business, I'm just seeing how much they apply in X scenario. I'm just trying to get at, is there something that we don't think about on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis that pops up with some frequency where you see negotiation as an underutilized but applicable skill?
There isn't anything I don't see it. And it's really dependent upon your definition. Long-term collaboration for positive results. Now, and what do you take the time with? Like, if I bother to take the time with anybody, with the Lyft driver to communicate, with the person who works at the Starbucks, with the person that works at a grocery store, it'll get me good practice, and I'm likely to discover something fascinating. Some people, I'm a time is money guy. Why am I taking the time? I'll talk to a Lyft driver because we're stuck in a Lyft together for 20 minutes. I'm like, all right, what I got to do here? Let me make this interesting.
Yeah.
But taking the time with somebody in the grocery store, or, I am finding more and more that people that I want to hire are under my nose. And if I start taking the time with people and the people that I'm impressed with in my everyday interactions, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to want to bring them into my business.
That makes sense. I had a CIA agent on here named Andrew Bustamante. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. And he made a point that
I didn't know that was his real name.
I don't. It's a great point.
I'll give you a clue. Here's the device to CIA guys. If he was really CIA, they never change their first name, but they always change their last names.
Does it look like a Bustamante now that you say it?
Yeah.
Well, now you got me creeped out. He's in my phone. But he said about relationships, every relationship is transactional. It was sort of an assessment, maybe a little cold sounding, but very CIA, FBI-y, if that makes sense. Do you agree with that?
I would make a very clear distinction between those two, but we can move forward.
Sure. But do you agree with that assessment, or do you see any distinction or any modification of that statement?
No, well, you can get into a really circular, crazy argument if you let yourself go too far down a rabbit hole. And what do I mean by that? I'm volunteering on a crisis hotline way back when, and there's some people say, you're not volunteering because you're a nice guy. There's no such thing as altruism. You're only helping people because it makes you feel good. Therefore, since it makes you feel good, it's not self-sacrificing, and you're really selfish to feed the poor. That's like saying Mother Teresa was a mercenary because she loved helping people so much.
Yeah.
You start going down this rabbit hole if you want to see it that way.
Yeah.
I'm only helping you because it makes me feel good. Therefore, I'm not really helping you, am I? And you can take that. in that definition. And the CIA guys are trained to think like that. I mean, in point of fact, working if they really work, if you really work for the CIA, difficult place to work because by definition, everything they do is a lie, and so that's difficult for some people. For other people, they fall right into it. It's really one of the big differences between the CIA and the FBI because for a short period of time, I dabbled in undercover work, and when you join the CIA, you're in light or heavy cover the entire time, and undercover sounds sexy and fun. And I tried it, and I just wasn't good with lying to people all the time, no matter what the purpose was. Lying to a drug dealer because of the greater good of society, I still didn't feel good about it. I'm glad I got a chance to try it. Hostage negotiation. If you're any good at hostage negotiation, you prize the truth above everything else. Your currency is honesty, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why I could get into that. But if you're any good as a hostage negotiator, you do not lie to the bad guys or anybody. Your honesty is your first currency. And when I got into negotiation, and and the people I learned from, Gary Nessner and others, taught me like that. Gary, my former boss, my mentor, like, yeah, I'm down with that. I'm going to find a way to be a straight shooter. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell it gently. But yeah, being a straight shooter is a reputation I want to live with.
That makes sense. The question really comes, you said that negotiation, correct me if I'm wrong, is short-term interaction for long or short-term collaboration for long-term relationships. Did I phrase that correctly?
Well, that's pretty close. I believe in long-term relationships and the collaboration, long-term trusted relationships. Now, maybe we only collaborate over the short term,
Sure.
but I'm definitely going to collaborate with you in a way that you're going to want to do it again. And there's never going to be a moment when you go like, aha, how dare you? I'm not going to want to do or say anything that is going to impact things negatively when you find out about it.
So the distinction in the other guy's statement about every relationship is transactional, then I guess comparing the two is transactional implies I have to get something from you and you from me. And that's not what your aim is with negotiation. It is
Yeah,
pure collaboration in the moment.
transactional is, I want to get something from you, and there's a whole way of interviewing people. It was principally pioneered by the CIA and some other people during the Second Iraq War, eliciting information.
Hmm.
And the whole eliciting information is getting you to believe that I'm your friend and getting you to tell me stuff that is really against your interest, and I'm gonna hurt you with it.
Hmm.
And there's some FBI agents that have been trained in this, both in empathy-based hostage negotiation and the eliciting information. And I was approached several years ago by a guy who was still on board with the FBI, and he'd been exposed in Baghdad and Iraq and the Middle East, a lot of this eliciting information stuff, which is being used on some terrorists. Versus, at least it's better than harsh interrogation, which I believe is breaks every law out there and is not justified and is stupid and inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
But he was telling me about how much experience he had with eliciting information. I said, "Look, dude, I can never hire you. I can't. That hoodwinking someone short term is against our core values. And look, maybe you got it. Maybe you made it work. Maybe somebody else is going to hire you. But we got a core value of long-term relationships, and hoodwinking you into believing I'm your friend when I'm going to turn into your enemy is never going to be part of what I do." And this whole eliciting information thing grew out of some of this nonsense with terrorism, and it's just a really bad idea.
When you're deploying tactical empathy, which we can define if you'd like, that might be a good foundational piece here in a moment, but are you more at risk of slipping to the tactical side of empathy where you slide over to hoodwinking, or are you more at risk at slipping from the empathy side to the sympathy side? And which is riskier? Which is worse in a negotiation?
Well, let's define empathy as the transmission of information, not a tool. Stephen Kotler, a friend of mine, great writer. I love his books. I highly recommend The Rise of Superman and Stealing Fire in particular.
We had him on a few weeks ago. Great guest. Yeah.
Tyler's a great dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wrote once, empathy is about the transmission of information. Compassion is the reaction to that transmission. So it's neither sympathy nor liking nor disagreement. Now, the word, it's just a transmission of my understanding of your perspective without taking a position on it at all. It becomes really an unlimited skill. Now, the reason we originally put tactical in front of empathy was a little bit to get people that are not uncomfortable with the woo-woo. Empathy is sympathy. I feel your pain. Let me give you a hug, which is a distortion of the word's original intention. And it has been distorted. I can't have empathy with them. Well, it's not sympathy. So we put the word tactical in front of it. It's a little bit like training Navy SEALs. Can you train a Navy SEAL to do yoga breathing? No. Can you tell them to do tactical breathing? Same thing. They'll do it right away. I ain't doing yoga breathing. Tactical breathing? Yeah, let me do tactical breathing. I'll do that all day long.
The branding and the packaging. I love that.
We're looking to brand it a little bit. Now, then also, as we learn more about neuroscience, and neuroscience is new stuff. Empathy is tactically adjusted by what we know about neuroscience. I know, number one, the negativity is going to cloud 75% of your thinking. Neuroscience. And I know that the right application of these empathic skills will deactivate, diffuse that 75%, which then clears the way for everything. So what do I do in a business deal? I don't say, look, you're gonna gain all this stuff if you do this. I'm going to start out by anticipating a common objection. You're going to tell me I'm expensive. So before we even go, I'm like, look, dude, I'm going to charge you a lot of money. I'm going to charge you more than anybody else. And then I'm anticipating the negativity in your head. I'm not planting it. I'm inoculating from it. So now the tactical application of empathy is how is it being adapted based on neuroscience? And also what we've quite frankly learned in our methodology that we've taught. And we got a consulting practice that's beaten everybody else. Like Robert Greene, great books. Read his stuff. I'm not aware that Robert Greene has a bunch of consultants out there that are teaching his methodology. He might not care to, which also may be a very big part of it. I think he's fascinated and having a wonderful time writing his books and imparting knowledge in person. And people love him, and I read his stuff and I learn from him. Black Swan's group's got a coaching cadre that's helping people make a lot of money. Sure. We got a lot of proof of concept the way we've applied it.
Back to the question on sympathy versus hoodwinking, those two extremes. I feel like that's a spectrum. Long term, I can imagine hoodwinking is the wrong because, if it went once revealed, trust erodes significantly. But in the moment when it's coming to maybe something like saving somebody's life, literally, if you're going to slip up from an empathetic standpoint, is it better to hoodwink or is it better to be sympathetic, or is one more dangerous than the other?
I'm enough of a believer in a process. I'm not going to fall victim to either. I'm going to take the time to tell you the truth so that you see me as a straight shooter. First of all, if authenticity is my currency, and it is, I can't hoodwink you. I'm bad at it. I'm not, and chances are, many cases, the invitations to lie is a test.
Yeah.
You're testing to see whether or not I'm going to lie to you. And even if I'm good at it, something's going to pick up. If you're a liar, you're going to know I'm lying. So chances are you're better at it than I am, and you may be testing me. And even if you're not testing me, if you're better at it than I am and I lie, you're going to pick it up right away. I'm coaching as a Al-Qaeda kidnapping, 2004, Paul Johnson lined up Al-Qaeda's, our assessment ends up being very accurate. They're going to kill him on deadline in Saudi, and they do. I'm talking to his then wife, his widow-to-be, and his boss. And his boss, a great guy, and knows that his employee that he cares very much about is in grave peril. And the last thing he's going to do is let his wife be victimized also. Now, I want to put her in the media, and I want her to do a media interview. And he looks at me and he says, if she does this, is this going to save her husband's life? And I think for a second, I look at him, I say, this might not be within reach. And he said, I didn't think so. I just want to see if you're going to lie to me. We'll do it. So I want to pass the test. I want to pass the test of authenticity. And me being honest with you in the moment is going to go a long way, especially if I'm looking for a long-term relationship, even with the bad guys. Because if they live, either I'm going to meet them again or one of my colleagues is, and I don't want anybody to have to live with my lies.
Yeah. The other side is what concerns me when I'm in a negotiation is sympathy. So I guess I'm kind of wondering how dangerous is sympathy when you get to that point where you're sort of ingrained in the plight of the other side. Is it just that you lose simple in a business setting, or is there more to it than that I'm not thinking about?
Yeah, there's the other side of it. It's a great question. If is sympathy a bad thing? It depends upon how it interferes. Are you going to make decisions that you're the only thing you have for working out is hope? Hope is essential and inadequate. Everybody's heard in the business, hope is not a strategy. But then how can you engage in transactions if you don't have some hope? And I've finally come to realize that hope is essential and inadequate. Now, what does that have to do with sympathy? If I become sympathetic to you, am I relying on hope alone? And is this going to be inadequate? Am I going to make a bad decision because I'm hoping for the best for you? I'm hoping you'll come to your senses. I'm hoping you'll start doing the things you should have been doing, that not doing them got you into this bad position in the first place. I'm hoping you'll change. I'm hoping you'll see the light. What's my hope obscuring in terms of the reality of behavior? And that's probably where sympathy is going to get in your way. It might obscure your legitimate assessment of the reality of people's behaviors.
I love that. So sympathy slides you over to hope for a best outcome, and hope as a strategy, as we all know, in any scenario, fails.
Well, it fails if it stands alone. It's inadequate. It's essential and it's inadequate.
Yeah. You talk about playfulness as a tactic. I hear you talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
That seems, I almost, and maybe I'm wrong, my assessment, my take on doing this research on you, I almost feel like it might be a favorite or something that you have very few scenarios in your mind where it doesn't or isn't impactful, doesn't work or isn't impactful. Can you talk about playfulness?
Yeah, it has pulled me out of some of the most interesting negotiations recently. I'm fairly solid, for lack of a better term, on this stat. You're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So if I get playful, I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to take in more information. I'm going to have more energy. And it's one of the few things I get playful when I'm tired and I'm worn out, and there's an immediate boost. It's like good cup of coffee right now. It's ridiculous, even when you're tired. It's contagious. So if I get playful, not only are you going to get smarter, you're going to like me more, and you're going to laugh with me. Yeah, and a lot of the barriers are going to come down. If I'm playful, I'm no longer a threat to you. Derek Gaunt, coach on my team, always talks about, for a successful negotiation, you got to remove yourself as a threat to the other side. As soon as you're not a threat, they're more likely to collaborate. Why would they collaborate with you if you're a threat? So if I'm getting playful with you, I've just done a lot to remove myself as a threat. We're joking around. We're having some fun. We're now collaborating against a mutual problem. Mutual problem might be the fact that I haven't paid my bills. But if I get playful with you about it, now suddenly you're open. Let somebody else pay the annoyance tax. You're going to give me the discount, and you're going to make it up on somebody else. And so this playfulness has bailed me out of some really interesting, fun situations recently, between a medical bill that was I was going to pay in full. It was a little over $3,000. Got it down to $700 just by being playful. And another one was when a suitcase of mine was lost in a Vegas airport. And I was playful with the woman behind the counter, used a little tactical empathy. And I've lost my suitcase a bunch of times at a bunch of airports. And this is the only time I was playful with her. She came out from behind the counter and went and found my suitcase. And nobody's ever done that before. So then you get fun outcomes and you get good stories.
Especially you talked about 75% of the brain is negative or ruminating on negative thoughts. And the two scenarios you just described, a biller or a collections person and
Yeah.
somebody that's working the I lost my bag counter at the airport, like they don't get a lot of playful. If anything, their defenses are right. Their defenses are heightened. And then if you come in a very different energy, in a different mode, I can see how effective that could be. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was fun.
God, I feel like I'm getting warmed up, but next time I'll have to get 3 hours with you. But let me do this. There's a guy you might know, Nir Eyal. Do you know that name? Nir Eyal. He's an author. I think he's in the Genius Network
It's
world,
not,
but he wrote a book called Hooked, which was the preeminent book on building habit forming products. So Meta uses that book as religion, how to form habit forming products. Just like you wrote Never Split the Difference, the book on negotiation. What's interesting though is Nir wrote a second book, almost the antidote to Hooked, called Indistractable. If you were to write a book that would sort of be the antidote to the concept of Never Split the Difference or the concepts in Never Split the Difference, any sense of the title or any sense of what it would be about?
I having trouble wrapping my mind around what the antidote would be.
Meaning your strategies, what is the do you I'm sure you've thought through how are they, if they are able to be, how are they defeated? How do you lose a negotiation using the opposite or using another tactic that defeats your current tactics? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, no, well, I'll answer it this way. My skills are neutral. They're by definition they're neutral, which means they're in the hands of the user. And the analogy I most frequently use is a scalpel in one person's hand saves a life, and another person's hand, it's a weapon of death.
Makes sense.
So, really want people to understand the motivation behind someone approaching you. And example, if the opening approach, have you given up on this project, is the best antidote to being ghosted. We'll get you back in a conversation in 3 to 5 minutes. Now you got to follow it up properly.
Mm.
So it's very context driven. It is so effective that I get it in turn used on me. And I'll get my first contact from somebody is, have you given up on us working on your website? All right, so you can't give up on something you haven't started. Now, you took a skill that you found used really, really effectively and triggered people who didn't have their guard up for the skills being used against them. And now you're using it on me. So, all right, I know now that you're going to use my skills against me. And there's a pretty good chance if we interact at all, it'll just be to test whether or not my suspicion is correct.
Hmm.
So the Black Swan method, the skills in it are tools. They're really in the hands of the user. Now, the user's motivation might be bad, and the user can use them very effectively to convince me that we have rapport when we don't. My gut instinct ferrets that out, and with use, anybody's gut instinct will also.
I wanted to ask this. Why Black Swan? What does that term mean? Negotiating like a black swan.
I am a fan of Nassim Nicholas Taleb's writings. And in 2007, right as I was getting out of the FBI, somebody pointed out to me he wrote a book called The Black Swan. And I thought it was going to be a great metaphor for business. And the subtitle is The Impact of the Highly Improbable. What are the little things that make all the difference in the world? And he got that metaphor from the fact that people believe that there are only white swans. And then I think in the 16th or 17th century in Australia, they discovered black swans. I thought, we didn't think this was possible. This changes everything. And I thought that is a great analogy for, number one, you're looking for the bits of information in the negotiation that change everything. And then ideally, you're using negotiation skills that are so subtle that nobody really notices, and they change everything. And I love the metaphor, and I borrowed it from Taleb, who borrowed it from 17th century Western world. And I love his writings. His book Anti-Fragile is a phenomenal book, and he's a great thinker, and I appreciate his writing and his thought patterns.
The key to life, it isn't money, it's happiness. And when you measure how happy you are, you actually become even more happy. Our friends at GoBundance, the Tribe of Millionaires, use a very specific tool to measure their happiness. It's called the Life Happiness Index, and you can have it too. Go over to GoBundance.com/LHI and take your Life Happiness Index assessment. You'll rate yourself in multiple categories on exactly how happy you are and get a custom output for you specifically that you can use in developing whatever goals you have for your life. GoBundance is the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. And the tool GoBundance members use at the base of all of that is the Life Happiness Index. Get out there and grab life big. Last question I want to ask. I wanted to touch on this at some point if we had a couple minutes, and I figure I will. Your son works in the business. He's
Used
to.
Yes.
What was that? Is that nature nurture? Because I notice a lot of families today that have businesses, the kids don't want anything to do with it. What do you attribute your son wanting to work alongside you for the period of time that he did?
Well, the period of time that he worked for me, he knew I needed my help. He knew I needed his help.
Mm.
I needed somebody that I could trust. I had a contract. I was being overwhelmed by an extremely difficult client, and I learned a lot of lessons out of that. And I needed somebody that I could trust that could help guide me through it. As it turned out, he'd been paying attention to the negotiation skills for quite some time, and had gotten very good at them. And the point in time in his life as I was founding the company, and then I needed his help on this big project, it coincided with a point in time when he could make the jump to help me out. I need somebody I could trust. I knew somebody I could count on. And then he helped me build the business.
Yeah.
And he is as much of an independent guy as I am. And we built the business to a certain point. I can remember probably about 4 years ago, he doesn't like being told no by anybody, even if it is his father. I didn't like it either. And we're running the business about 4 years ago, and I'm thinking, like, how am I in the dark here? How do I not know what's going on? Now everything's working fine. It's just I don't know what's going on. And then I thought, oh. And I text my old boss Gary, and I sent him a text saying, my son is exactly like me. I owe you an apology.
I love that. Yeah.
And so then, he got me to the point where he was like, okay, things are rocking and rolling. I've gotten you to this point. I got some of my own independent stuff I want to do. And he made the decision to go out on his own.
Chris, I appreciate you doing this. Appreciate you being here. I know you do a lot of podcasts. Where do you want to direct folks? Website, social media handle, whatever's easiest.
Yeah, the best thing, our newsletter is a gateway to everything. The coaching, the training, and what I mentioned to you before, the PDF with the no-oriented questions. I mean, we'll share the link with you. Take the no-oriented questions, sign up for the newsletter, get the PDF, and take them for a test drive, and they'll work. And here's what I'm asking you to remember: they're the tip of the iceberg. And let us help you.
Appreciate you being here, Chris.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.